Hello, humans? Book Goblin again. I'm gonna do a little book review for you today. Well, I suppose a medium-sized book review. It is of The Ninth Reign by Jen Williams. May not have heard of it. I hadn't before I bought it on a whim. It's a fantasy, and to explain it, it's probably easiest to give you a little bit of the background. And this isn't really a spoiler, because it's all delivered to the reader in the first few chapters as an introduction. There's quite a lot going on in it, really. It's a little bit centred around this species called Iborans. They're sort of vampires. I mean, not exactly vampires, because they would prefer to eat magical tree sap from their tree god. But he died. So instead, they drink human blood. Obvious second choice to, vegetarian tree sap. Yeah, human blood. We wouldn't know anything about that, would we, Rod? No. However, it turns out that drinking human blood is not that great for Iborans, and after a few hundred years of drinking human blood, bearing in mind they're practically immortal, they get horrible disease and die. Unlucky. For the Iborans, not so much for the humans. And the result of that is, of the race, there's like 3 left. Which sounds great for the humans. Except that every, 1,000 years or so, this world gets attacked by an even worse threat called the Worm People. And in every previous attack, it was the Iborans who fought them off, using magical war beasts that were born from their magical tree god. That tree god that's now dead. And that leaves the question of, if or when the Worm People attack again, who will fight them off this time? It's a tough one to answer. Because, the Worm People were really horrible. They're called Worm People. They're really just sort of beetles that infest the land and eat the humans. And there's not a lot to stop them, because they've got other worse things as well. It's not looking good for this world, if we're honest. Anyway, that's all the background. The actual main characters are a girl called Noon, who's a witch, and she's a little bit erratic, shall we say? Has a mild history of burning her whole family alive. By accident, not to worry. The result of this sort of thing is that all the witches in this world are locked up, basically in prison, and used as slaves. But this one witch, Noon, she escapes and meets up with one of the few remaining Iborans, who's a fearsome, alcoholic, poetic, sex-addicted mercenary warrior who's working for an archaeologist. Yeah, no, it kind of is as boring as it sounds. Kind of felt they could have done a bit more with that character. And this archaeologist, called Vintage, because she's a wine-swilling, eccentric historian. In fact, the whole book's a bit wine-obsessed, now that I think about it. So the trio of characters, Noon the Witch, Tor the Iboran, and Vintage the Historian, travel around. Noon's trying to evade being recaptured by the witch hunters. Tor the Iboran is concerned about the cleanliness of his outfit and the source of his next glass of wine. And Vintage is looking for the next piece of cursed worm metal from previous invasions of the worm people. Think about it, I'm not really sure what the plot was. I suppose there's nothing wrong with this book. It's got all the ingredients of an interesting fantasy. Just didn't really come together for me. There was a little side story with the two other living Iborans called Hest and Aldazer. Aldazer was kind of entertaining. Not really sure what the point of his scenes were. And Hest, well, her scenes sort of had a point, but they were really boring. Found her an irritating character. But those were minor points. The three main characters did get up to some little adventures and into some interesting scrapes that did keep the plot moving and sort of interesting, but I'm struggling to make it sound interesting, which is probably because it wasn't that interesting. Now, this book may be suffering a little from the fact that I've read some really good books recently, like the Stormlight Archive before, and I'm currently reading Kings of the Wild, which is it's kind of just boisterous fun. This book didn't really have any great selling points. Nothing specifically wrong with it, like I keep saying. It's probably a 3 or 3.5 star book. It's not terrible. If any of these things interest you, I would suggest you pick it up. But there are a lot of better books, so probably pick up those first. Hey? That's enough moaning from me. So yeah, The Ninth Reign. A distinctly acceptable fantasy read. Bye.